is Cosplay? My grandma has no idea, but is really supportive. My Uber driver usually asks if it's a weird kink thing, and cashiers tend to think that I work at Disneyland. My fellow cosplayers can disagree or gatekeep, but most are super welcoming and inclusive about what counts as cosplay. So what is it? Cosplay is a combination of the terms costume and play or roleplay. The costume part is the obvious, but also the more drama-filled part, at least within the community. We'll get to that later. For now, just know that the 3 methods to costuming are to make, buy, or modify. There's a little bit of gatekeeping, but whatever method you choose, all that really matters is that you match your character or concept's design, look, style, or general vibe. The roleplay part takes on a lot more forms than you probably realize. The most common and low-key version is just posing. If you ask to take a picture at a con, most cosplayers will strike some kind of pose that they feel suits the character. It's also not limited to pictures, masquerades, or competitions. Sometimes just being recognized as a character often involves striking some kind of pose. Another form of roleplay is quoting or just repeating a line or two from your character. This isn't usually like a formal thing, just a quick exchange even in passing. It's really common that if someone says, "Hey Harley," that you respond with a line that your character says, like, "Hey Puddin." You might even do it in your character's accent, which I'm not good at. The cosplayer can start this too. If I'm dressed up as a stormtrooper and pass by other Star Wars cosplayers, I might say, "Rebel scum." It feels kind of cringe at first maybe, but you're usually around like-minded company, fellow superfans who are just as stoked as you are. And it's never cringe when a kid comes up to you thinking that you are the character, like you gotta make it special for them. I learned a lot from the Spider-Man cosplayer named Zach, who would always crouch for a picture and help the kids do Spider-Man hands. And he'd always end the interaction with like, "Don't forget to do your homework and eat all your vegetables so you can be smart and strong like me." And the little kids would just be like, so yeah, you don't have to be like a stellar role-playing actor, but just sprinkle in a couple of quotes and the spirit of the character so that you can be charming.
Adventure time!
Photo shoots and video shoots became a super popular aspect of roleplay as social media exploded. This takes posing to the next level since you usually pick a set or location that matches the character or theme as well. It's often collaborative since a photographer is often involved, and while they usually aren't cosplayers themselves, they're a big part of the community too. There's also cosplay skits, which are most common in contests and masquerades, but obviously now it's pretty common on TikTok also YouTube. In contests, it's usually more of a lip sync situation, and there's often a whole dance or skit with props. Sometimes there's like full-on acting, but I think it's kind of hard to set up the audio in terms of like microphones, so I usually only see lip syncing and a short performance. On TikTok, it's also often lip syncing, but much easier to see the expressions and acting, obviously. Cosplay music videos, or CMVs, are also pretty popular, which can vary from sort of like themed skits with just one or a few characters to compilations of cosplays that you see at cons, like from Mineral Blue. The highest effort cosplay roleplay is probably fan films. I'm not exactly sure where the line is between acting and fan films, but I think that the latter tends to stem from like a super fan level of love for a character or fandom. It's usually not like a full-length story, but might be more like an episode or just a focus on a specific interaction or fight. Sometimes this is to reimagine things in the source material, like expanding on a relationship or ship, making something live action, playing with gender or sexual identity, bringing in different language or cultural interpretations, and/or diversifying racial representation. Or just a loving homage that will melt your face like everything that mall cosplay puts out there. It's such a visual medium, and cosplayers are amazing at making stuff, so these fan films tend to be really incredible quality and pull talent from all walks of content creation. King Vader might be one of the most well-known like fan film creators. I don't know if he considers himself a cosplayer, but he often recruits a lot of cosplayers to help with the costumes and often be background characters or just other characters in the films too. That's most of the forms of roleplay. There's also some overlap between the cosplay community and other communities like LARP, furries, historical costuming, reenactments. Like all of those communities also involve costuming and varying degrees of roleplay. In my experience, these communities are pretty nice to each other and bond over what they have in common. Dressing up is not that serious, but it is that fun, and we're all just people who like love stuff and want to share that love with others. I've really enjoyed seeing cosplay go from this little niche part of pop culture that outsiders assumed was a weird sex thing, which wow, self-report, and grown into this huge phenomenon that pretty much everyone knows about. It's costume and roleplay combined mind, but it's also its own little industry and ecosystem. And to take a peek into that, let's take a look at what kind of content gets cosplayed. Also, hi, I'm Hendo. I probably should have said that way earlier. I'm gonna break up cosplay content into 6 different categories because I don't know, you can't stop me. There's Western media, comics, movies, shows, games, books, mythology, lots of stuff. And then there's Asian media, anime, movies, shows, games, books, myths, legends, action figures. I should note here that cosplay as a practice is rooted in Western science fiction culture, but the literal term cosplay is Japanese. The history is honestly fascinating. TLDR, this was the first cosplay before it was cosplay. Myrtle and Forrest were the first actual cosplayers. Mari was the first well-known Japanese cosplayer, and Takahashi coined the term cosplay. Let me know if you want me to really cover the history of cosplay. I think it's neat and dramatic and kind of hilarious. Anyway, so cosplay is very culturally collaborative, but I've separated Western and Asian media for the sake of them being fairly separate before like the Cold War-ish era. There's video games, and I'm making that its own category because obviously it's kind of a newer invention, and I feel like both East and West are involved in the development and distribution. The gaming industry is absolutely huge and a really big source of cosplay. In part, I think that's because you can spend a lot of time in the game getting a good look at the whole character or outfit. There are often multiple outfits. It's like a gold mine for cosplay. There's also a ton of cosplay from the role-playing community, like we're talking RPG games like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, and also events like LARP or Ren Fairs or even SCA. These have their own stories, lore, and characters, and overlap a lot with fantasy and historical genres broadly. Pop culture and memes also get cosplayed. It makes sense that memes get cosplayed since a lot of them are borrowed from screenshots of like media. Sometimes they're also just a super common way to communicate, so that makes them extra recognizable to most people anyway. Like a lot of us are really online. I think also since the advent of music streaming, musicians focus a lot more on concert events to earn their income. So those have become like real spectacles on their own with highly recognizable outfits. Beyonce and Taylor Swift cosplays popped up a ton, especially this last year. Obviously, I don't know that a lot of those attendees would consider themselves cosplayers, but it's very much in like the same vein. And if somebody showed up in a Beyonce cosplay at a con, like everybody would know who that is, I think. I think it's so cute that people recreate some of these looks to wear to those concerts. Things like fast food places and internet browsers also get cosplayed. Nothing is off limits. And of course, not all cosplay is of established characters. It's also popular to cosplay original characters, or OCs. Especially with the growing popularity of Dungeons and Dragons, more and more nerds are coming up with their own characters and like stories and background lore and these designs and are bringing them to life. People also cosplay other people's original characters or fan art. It's kind of like coming full circle now that I think about it. Artists can inspire cosplayers, and actually cosplayers inspire artists too. It's a neat little community that even major companies are starting to acknowledge. Like, did you know that some game studios actually release cosplay guides? Since we really thrive on detailed references, and companies realize how much free advertising and love comes from the cosplay community. If you love us, we'll love you back. That's the stuff that gets cosplayed. Now let's talk about some of the approaches to cosplay. Not the crafting techniques. What I mean is before you even start making something, you gotta decide how you want to interpret a character. The most common approach is a focus on accuracy and recreation. This may or may not have a lot of room for interpretation depending on the level of detail in the original media. Like take Chrono Trigger, for example. The game itself came out in 1995 on the SNES, and it's a pixel game. The most detail you see is actually just on the box cover art. So in this case, there's a lot of room to interpret these little tiny pixels. Same for kind of any animated series like Avatar: The Last Airbender. These are great animations, but still translating it to real life involves deciding on fabrics and textures, and there's like a lot of variety in the way that those costumes come to life. Live action media, especially nowadays, has way more reference photos and established IRL looks, so people can get really into making their cosplays as accurate as possible. The Star Wars 501st Legions are notorious for being very strict about what gets christened as a screen-accurate cosplay. Video games feel like borderline live-action content. The models are so detailed nowadays, and so accuracy is a huge focus of those cosplays sometimes too. The amount of accuracy has been a topic of gatekeeping in the community, but the vast majority of time, the aim is just to be accurate enough to be recognized as the character. If you're about to get every seam, contour, and color perfectly correct, that's just sprinkles on top. In contrast to this accuracy focus, there's also the style approach, because it's also popular to take a character and translate them into a particular style. This includes media genres like horror or pop, but also niche styles like steampunk, cyberpunk, goth, things like that. A lot of artists will also translate a character into their style, and that gets cosplay too. In a similar vein, there's also approaches that play with gender. Gender bending is when someone cosplays a version of a character that's the opposite gender, usually matching their own IRL identified gender. For example, Harley Quinn is a female character, but my friend Chris here is doing a male version of this character, and he is also a male. This is not the same as what at least used to be called crossplay, which is when someone cosplays a gender that isn't how they identify in order to match the character's gender. For example, Jack Sparrow is a male character, and Allison here is a female, but is super successfully making her appearance male to match the character. The concept of gender has really expanded, so I think crossplay is a bit of an outdated term, or even sometimes kind of an offensive one, as we start to conceptualize gender as a spectrum, even in the mainstream. Especially because more openly identifying as non-binary is much more common nowadays, so you might think you're clocking someone's gender and be like, ooh, cool Genderbend cosplay. But no, that's actually a gender they identify with because they identify with both, or neither. The cosplay community is pretty cool and patient about pronouns and gender fluidity. People generally want to be respectful. I've even seen some cosplayers and artists start to use the terms masc or femme and just kind of leave it there. The cosplay community is also kind of uniquely suited to people experimenting with identity. By the time you're watching this, terms and norms may have changed. Just be cool and open-minded. Listen to the communities you want to be an ally to. Find a polite way to ask. Someone will give you the patch notes if you're not that familiar with the queer community yourself. So to summarize, crossplay is a bit of an outdated term. It's better to just not speculate on someone's gender. But genderbend is still the main term for when the gender of a character gets tweaked, and it's still a really popular cosplay approach. Another approach to cosplay is a humanized or anthropomorphized version of characters. In Japan, there's actually a specific word for that called Gijinka. And this is when you cosplay something that's like an animal or even an object. Pokemon Gijinka are especially popular. Here's me doing the legendary dogs with a couple friends. I think a really crazy iconic moment was when Jessica Nigri cosplayed as Deathwing, the dragon aspect from World of Warcraft. Jess is known for doing sexy versions of cosplays like this Gijinka Pikachu. And holy cow, was she bullied mercilessly and like vilified. People were so rude and would just assume you can't like be hot and talented at the same time. Like they'd claim she didn't really make any of her cosplays and none of these were real cosplays, and the gatekeeping in cosplay like used to be so whack. Like, it still kind of is, but like, I swear it was worse. But then boom, Jess rolls up to BlizzCon in this number that she designed herself with the help of Zach Fisher. Most people, at least that I saw, shut up about Jess and her sexy Gijinka designs after this, and by proxy, kind of left a lot of other sexy cosplayers alone too. I'm not saying the shift was all Jess, but like, this was a moment to a lot of us newbies at the time. 2016 cosplay lore. Anyway, Gijinka cosplays are some of the most fun and clever in my opinion. It's crazy how people can take something super not human looking and translate it into a human form that is instantly recognizable. Another approach to cosplay is the mashup, where you combine two characters together. Sometimes things just like work together. One of the ways that I grew up following on Instagram was being in this Slave Leia Disney Princess mashup group with friends. This made more sense at the time because it was like news that Disney had acquired Star Wars as a franchise. I'm not gonna lie, we kind of beat that one to death since we also did a Disney Fets group, and there was this Disney Jedi group that I actually got kicked out of for like a really weird reason. There's no time. My friend Alvin and I also did Star Wars Toy Story, and I have never taken so many pictures with families and little kids in my whole life. It was really fun. Like I mentioned before, you're probably familiar with lewd or sexy versions of cosplay, but they're actually also conservative versions. When I went to a con in Salt Lake City in Utah, which had like a larger religious population, I actually saw some more covered up versions of characters. And actually the Disney parks themselves often do a more conservative look for their character. I think mostly because those girls get harassed by like older men, so I don't know. Also, hijab cosplay is becoming more common, and I think that's really cool and creative. Often the hijab is used to convey the hair of a character, and sometimes I also see like skin-toned fabrics cover where like skin shows on a character. When it comes to like the lewd or sexier cosplays, like I know there's a lot of criticism out there Sometimes it feels like putting on, I don't know, a certain color of underwear and a wig is not that high effort, though I do maintain that putting on a wig is always high effort. Don't piss me off. But honestly, there are a lot of really, really cool interpretations of like sexier versions of characters, and there's often a lot of thought that goes into it. I think people are a lot harder on it than they should be, and I do think that's also phasing out nowadays, now that people realize like a lot of work can go into something. You can tell when something is high effort and when something is like not high effort, but the same goes for stuff that isn't that sexy, so. Makeup and SFX are also common approaches to cosplay, though usually just on social media and not in person for obvious reasons. Of course, lots of makeup or especially SFX focused cosplayers do go to cons in public. It's just really time consuming, so it's often better suited to shoots. And I'm rounding out this list of approaches with closet cosplay and Disney bounding. Closet cosplay actually has a few different meanings, but generally refers to cosplaying with stuff that you already own or have in your closet. This got popular during lockdown, especially when people couldn't go out and get supplies or make stuff, and it's also considered a little more environmentally friendly. I think it was popular to do closet cosplays of the My Hero Academia characters. People are really good at interpreting what like the IRL style of these characters would be, and I still love seeing it. And this is kind of related to Disney bounding, where you go to the Disney parks, especially the LA parks, and dress like a Disney character. Not literally like them, because that's very much not allowed. They will kick you out, but just sort of dress like color schemes and styles reminiscent of these characters. I don't think Disney bounders consider themselves cosplayers. I'm not honestly sure. The Disney community is like really intense, but I do love seeing what people come up with for their Disney bounds. So I think that was a pretty good summary of what gets cosplayed and how, if I do say so myself. But where, you might ask? Mostly conventions of all kinds, but also at fan events like festivals, Ren Fair, even Burning Man, concerts, movie premieres, charities, parties. There are very few rules when it comes to where you can cosplay. Unless you're in Japan, do not cosplay in public there. It's very culturally inappropriate, and they do have rules against it. And that's probably true other places also. You can think of some pretty practical places to not cosplay. Like I said, if you go to Disneyland, they will make you change. Though as far as I know, you are, I think, allowed to dress up at Universal Studios. Anyway, when I lived in LA, I would see cosplayers all the time doing shoots on location, especially around the Arts District or the Disney Concert Hall. And of course, nowadays, some people don't even cosplay outside, some just do it at home on social media. You might also be asking, why cosplay? And oh my god, there are so many reasons, and I'd rather leave that for another video. I think we've sufficiently answered the question, what is cosplay? It's costume, it's roleplay, it's diverse, it's inclusive for the most part. It does have its problems, but it's largely a community full of super fans, social outcasts, bullying survivors, and just extremely talented people who have lots of love to give. Cosplay combines so many disciplines. It's a true art form that brings together lots of talented people, whether it emphasizes the craft or costume or an elaborate performance. For me, cosplay started out as a hobby, an outlet for making stuff with my hands. It grew into my career. It's given me some of my best friends and happiest memories. I owe so much to cosplay, and I really hope that you give it a shot if you haven't already. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm dipping my toe into deep dives and video essays. Leave a cowboy emoji in the comments if you made it all the way to the end here. I spent an eternity on this and really tried to credit as much as possible, so extra thanks to all of these channels that I pulled footage from. Everything's credited below in a Google Doc with links because it's really long. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can, and leave me a comment letting me know what else I should cover in the cosplay community. I'd love to hear how you define cosplay, or if you think I missed any major components. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Bye! Bye. Thank you so much to all of my patrons, especially my top tier patrons, RickyRod33, Mike D, Andrew Leo, Grant Valentine, Robert Reyes, Turner, Nips86, Mickle, Josh M, Shottenwolf, and Adam Trubiano. Thank you!